Welcome back into our Huskers Radio Network podcast. I'm Jessica Coody, and today we continue our Title IX podcast series as we celebrate excellence in women's athletics for 50 years of Title IX. And I'm so very excited for today's conversation as we welcome in Chris Anderson, a longtime staple of this Nebraska Athletics department. What, 40 years almost?
Counting the student years, yes.
Wow,
so it's been a while.
Worked in the sports information department and currently works with Tom Osborne in the Teammates organization. So we're going to dive into all of that. You've got, I know, so many great stories to tell. So let's start at the beginning. You grew up, you're a Nebraska kid. Did you always grow up loving sports?
I did love sports. I just wasn't a very good athlete.
So you come to Nebraska and you decide to major in
Journalism.
Journalism.
I knew that all along.
Okay. And so what did you want to do? Did you want to do sports information when you started?
No, I wanted to be the weather girl on 10/11.
So how did you transition then into, working in communications?
Well, I live 1 mile from Panama, Nebraska, and Don Bryant's son lived in Panama, and he suggested, since I was in journalism and I was working for him, and he owned The Voice, which was a small town newspaper, he suggested that I hit up his dad, Don Bryant, for a job, and the rest literally is history. I walked into Don's office, he interviewed me, and he said, "Well, we have a position in women's athletics," and I said, "Sure." And that was my very first day of school in 1979.
Wow. So what did you love about it that you thought, okay, this is going to be my career?
I loved telling great, upbeat, fun stories. Loved being at sporting events, so it was never a job to me. And I just loved being a part of a team, even though I couldn't run fast and I wasn't tall enough to jump over the net or anything like that. So.
That's awesome. So in 1993, you were promoted to the director of sports information, and you became one of the first women to be in that role for Division I football program. So what was that like? Did you realize at the time that there weren't very many women in that role, and how did that come about that you felt ready for that job?
Well, Don Bryant was very encouraging to me. We all decided it would be best to try it as an interim, just to make sure I was comfortable as well. And so it was kind of a whole year of learning, but he would teach me along the way. And all the coaches I worked with were just so gracious. They didn't ever hesitate to work with me. They just said, "What do you need to do differently than a man to do your job? And what can we do to help you?" So I feel so blessed.
So, and again, the term trailblazer is what we're using as we honor women throughout this season. And so, did you realize you were a trailblazer at the time?
For the record, I do like trailblazer over pioneer, so thank you very much.
Love it.
No, I don't think I really did, because I was part of COSIDA, which is the College Sports Information Directors of America, and there were a lot of pretty young women at that time finding their way into sports and a lot of opportunities. And so I didn't really realize it right away. No, I was just trying to do the best I could here. It didn't really get beyond the doors of the stadium here as far as I was concerned.
We had talked to Pat Logston earlier this year, and she had talked about how Tom Osborne was so great about her and her position and allowing women to have roles that, again, weren't normal across the country.
Yeah.
So what was your perspective of that, of Tom Osborne and working with him back when you first took over that role in the early 90s?
Well, he was the first one that came to me and asked me what I felt I needed from him to be able to do it effectively, and asked me if it was, did I need to be at every practice? Did I need to be in the locker room? Did I need to stay each night because, a family and such? And I said, no, I can do it this, and it was perfect. I mean, it really was pretty seamless between myself and the football program, and coach just made everybody feel comfortable, always. And of course, very respectful of everyone he has ever met, so.
So you sign on, and then Nebraska just wins national championships. What was the first few years like? I gotta imagine it was just a whirlwind. You go into that role, and then all of a sudden now you're working with the best team in the country.
Yeah, probably what stands out to me the most is when Brooke died, quite honestly. And that put every single thing from that moment on into complete perspective, because you just can't get that back. And it was so monumental. And so I've always just said, I have this little Don Bryant voice in my head, Chrissy, there are more important things in life than football. And that's always been my mantra, and particularly, and then losing Jake Young and Sam Foltz after that, I'm just continually reminded that there are a lot more important things, but it sure was fun.
When, as someone that's in that role that is working so closely with the team, to see a national championship at the end of the season, how special was that? Because I know we talked to Trev Alberts about you, and he said, you were really like family to these players. So I know you got really close with the players, and so for them to have a dream come true like that, what was that like when you see their goals come true at the end?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's Trev's mom that made me feel like family. So she was an absolute joy. I've loved her. You do get to know them pretty well. And I will say that particularly later on, like with Eric Crouch and Grant Wistrom, Will Shields, they have to do some degree of interviews in order to get themselves out there. And some of them aren't comfortable speaking or just don't have a lot of words to say. And so that's the part where I think you become pretty close and they trust you to give them guidance, even if it's while you're walking to the press conference kind of thing. So I think that actually was one of the things that I was able to do fairly easily, is they wanted my opinion in most situations, and I'm always willing to give it.
I think, for people that might not realize, it's changed a lot, but when you had first started, and Trev had talked about this too, when award submissions, which Nebraska has a ton of individual award winners, and it was so different then, and you had to do a lot of legwork to help get that out there because there was no social media that gave a ton of exposure. Not everybody was on national TV all the time. Yeah. So can you take us through that process and tell fans like what that was like when you were, putting Trev's Butkus campaign together, or some of those other guys that won these national awards?
Well, again, I go back to Don Bryant, who was the sports information director for 40-some years before me. At the time when I became sports information director, Nebraska had only had 3 ever. Mm-hmm. So he always, on Friday nights, literally took these big, huge film canisters with him. And if they went down to Oklahoma, he would visit each one of the television stations and drop off video film of, like, Johnny Rogers.
Wow.
Yeah. So I figured I had it pretty good. But one of the things that he told me was return every phone call, no matter what, and to always be personal and try to do phone calls, not emails. And that taught me a lot, because I think that was very important. And through the years, even when we had some negativity to answer to, I just tried to always be accountable. And I think that is one characteristic I learned from Tom. He's always accountable. Coach.
How do you balance, because the media coverage here it's not like this everywhere, right? And there's positive, but you just mentioned the negative. So how do you balance, because you have to be the voice that people go to, but then, again, just balancing it all where you probably have to be stern sometimes, but then also be that voice and that face of connecting the media to the players and the program. So how do you balance all of that?
It's changed a lot, even since I have been out of media relations. Mm-hmm. It's really changed a lot. And with Twitter and all the social media, I really didn't have that as my needed to handle in the years where I was sports information director. So I think we have so many great, amazing young people that can keep up with all that. But it was a lot to handle, but a lot of times what I loved about athletics was you concentrated on football, and then when football was done, you did basketball, and then when basketball was done, you concentrate on baseball, and then it's the seasons, and there's always a little high and low and everything, but that's what made it so fun, was if one year didn't end so great, there was always something else right around the corner. But The media part was certainly important in players getting some attention in those days, because a lot of the media just didn't come to Nebraska. They would definitely see us play like in UCLA or USC or Penn State and that kind of thing, but you had to recognize that as a fact in those days.
You had mentioned earlier that you wanted to tell uplifting stories. Do you have a favorite story that you told?
Oh, I remember one time, and I apologize, I can't remember his name, but I did track for like 25 years, but we had the first high jumper who was supposed to go 7 foot. And Coach Pepin will probably correct me on this, but we thought, how can we show people what 7 foot is? And I believe we pulled a bus out in front of the Devaney Center and marked and said, can he jump this high or something? It was silly, but for the most part, we hardly ever used gimmicks. Very, very rarely, even though there's some great ones out there to be had. So
you worked during the time, at the heat of this Oklahoma-Nebraska rivalry, well, part of it, and this rivalry renewed last year and this year, and you had talked about, before we started recording, about how much this has meant to you. You're going to get to connect with a lot of former players. What do you remember about Oklahoma and Nebraska in this rivalry?
Oh, gosh. Fumblerooskies, and they always had a trick play, always had this 3rd and 10, and they swing it, just some great players and great names across the board. But I do remember when, unfortunately, we lost to Oklahoma, but when Mickey Joseph slid into the bench, that was frightening, and it's probably the only reason we lost.
What do you remember about Mickey Joseph as a player and working with him?
I remember his smile. He was always happy, always laughing and talking and making sure that everybody around him felt good about themselves, had a good time.
Okay, and then I wanted to ask you about, you have a favorite Tom Osborne story. Obviously, everybody likes T.O. stories.
Gosh, I think my favorite stories right now are his jokes. I love how he improvises them to fit the situation. He hated photo day. So we tried to make that as easy on him as possible, but he was just so easy, he would start most every practice report with pretty uneventful.
Was there ever a moment where you thought, wow, this is what leadership looks like? I mean, was there a moment for that with him?
Oh, I definitely. When I moved out of media relations and I started doing community relations, I felt like I just didn't have the right, because like you said, I kind of had to be bossy to start with, and I was trying to be a softer me, and I went in to talk to him about that because I had heard him speak on it, and he gave me a little book on servant leadership and told me that I could ask him any question anytime, and that really helped me, because then I thought, if I could be a 10th of the servant that he is.
Wow.
And that's why I'm so thrilled to be back at Teammates.
It's amazing. Well, again, honoring Title IX and its 50-year anniversary of Title IX, so you have a great perspective of that because you were here as, women's sports really took off here. So how did you see the growth of women's sports into what they are today? And, you've got such dominant programs in multiple sports here.
Well, a lot of it had to do with media. So, like, when I first got here, when I came back, when I first graduated, I went to Kansas State. We had already had computers here at Nebraska, and then we didn't have any at Kansas State. And I'm like, oh no. So technology and radio contracts, and then television contracts and website contracts and all those emerging media things. A lot of that really helped women's sports a lot. And so that really I felt was beneficial. But, over the years as I was here, we added soccer and bowling and rifle and just a lot of opportunities for women. So I think it's been a good thing. It's all about a fair opportunity to compete, and I think it's been good for that. I really do.
Absolutely. So again, talking about how there weren't a lot of women in your role when you took it over, but was there a woman that was inspiring to you throughout your career?
Oh, well, you mentioned one of them, Pat Logston. She had that calmness about her that never got rattled. Barbara Hibner was amazing. And Barbara would remind you that this is an opportunity that women never had before, so don't blow it, you know? And then Coach Revelle, because Coach Revelle was just so able to take what Barbara said and then spin it in a fun, kind, just happy way. And all those women were definitely mentors to me.
I love that. Well, speaking of mentorship, I know you're very passionate about what you're doing now working with teammates. So why did you want to get involved with that?
Well, you know, I was there when they started it in 1991. 22 football players held up their hands, said they wanted to be mentors. One of those was Mickey Joseph, first one of 22. And so it's grown now to almost 10,000 mentors everywhere in 5-state region, and we've helped 45,000 kids with a mentor. And the statistics are phenomenal, but the biggest one over the last 3 years is that our mentees report a higher level of hope for the future. And they graduate on time and all those other things, but just reporting that hope, especially over the last few years, and then our mentors report that they get as much out of it as the mentees. And it's all safe in school, so that's what makes it unique. But I just, I love everything about it, and I just think it was designed to be safe and long-lasting, and Tom and Nancy's concept is grown, and it works. So it's pretty solid and brilliant and works well.
If someone wants to get involved or know more about it, where should they go if they're listening in?
Yeah, anybody can become a mentor, and we do have background checks that you must pass, 3rd through K, and then we have Teammates Plus program, which helps our mentors. We provide scholarships when they go on to college. So teammates.org, there's everything you need there to find out if you want to be a mentor. And there's 140 chapters in Nebraska and almost 200 in the 5-state region. So thanks for that opportunity. Appreciate it.
That's awesome. Last thing I got for you, I mean, again, just one of the women that this athletics department selected to honor throughout this series on football games. What does that mean to you that, you know, you meant so much to this program and they want to honor you?
It's very humbling. I don't feel like I have really done anything beyond what I was hired to do, but I think just being a positive force for people is helpful, but I'm very humbled and very honored and appreciative of this.
Chris Anderson, appreciate your time and congratulations. It's been great getting to know you and fascinating stories. I could sit here talking to you forever, but I know you have stuff to do, and we'll let you get out of here.
Just a little shout out to Trev. He reminds me so much of Coach Osborne.
Really?
Yeah, and I think he's read the book on servant leadership too, so appreciate him.
What besides that remind you of Tom Osborne and Trev?
I think he's an excellent listener. He really engages with people, and I think that's one thing that's very important to coach.
All right. Well, thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Again, make sure you subscribe and like wherever you listen to never miss an episode right here on the Huskers Radio Network podcast.